Hi, and welcome to this week's Bible study. We're going to be in the book of Mark, verses 1 through 6. So if you'd go ahead and turn there now, I've entitled this week's lesson, Tripping Over Wisdom, for reasons that will be discovered here in a few minutes. And remember that in the last few weeks, we've been talking about how to pursue godly wisdom and how to become a truly wise person. We're at about the halfway point of our summer study. Last week, in the discussion of wisdom, we talked about Laura Ingalls Wilder and some of the very practical lessons that she had to teach us about not only being a wise person, but also passing down a legacy of wisdom to the next generation. For the last few days, we've had the privilege of being in the very place where several, in fact, the majority of the Little House on the Prairie books were set in De Smet, South Dakota. And we actually were able to spend time on Ma and Pa's 160 acres and to sleep right there on the property. So that was really a wonderful experience. Now, just about every single thing in De Smet, South Dakota is named after the Ingalls or the Wilder families because of the popularity and the fame of the Little House on the Prairie books. The one thing that is not named after either the Ingalls family or the Wilders family is the town itself, De Smet. De Smet is named after Pierre de Smet, and Pierre de Smet was a missionary to the Native Americans. And Pierre de Smet, it said, loved two things. The first thing is he loved God. And the second thing was that he loved sharing God with the Native Americans. And so he traveled all over the American West. And in fact, a lot of tribes that were considered very, very dangerous and very hostile, Pierre de Smet had a great relationship with as he shared Jesus with those folks starting in the 1830s. Now, one of the things that Pierre de Smet noticed as he traveled around the West, and something that really concerned him, were the unscrupulous traders who were getting rich off of selling alcohol to the Native Americans, along with all sorts of firearms. And the people that they were really targeting were not the older Native Americans, but in fact the very young, what we would call teenage Native Americans. And he was or they were trying, the traders were trying to create a taste for hard liquor among these Native Americans. And they were actually promoting drunkenness. And as shocking as that sounds, we actually saw when we were in the country of Paraguay, we saw that some of the American tobacco companies were building schools in Paraguay in return for the ability to stand outside those schools before and after the school day was going and actually give away free cigarettes to the young people, the elementary school and the teenage students as they came and went from school, because they knew if they could get them hooked on cigarettes at a very early age, they'd have customers for life. Well, that's what these traders in the American West were doing. And when Pierre de Smet saw this, he was actually outraged. And he went to both the Native American and the settler leaders and talked to them about this. And he said, this is going to have horrible consequences down the line, and you need to listen to me. And in fact, it did have horrible consequences. Those drunken, heavily armed Native Americans were actually a huge part of the reason for the Plains Indian War. De Smet also complained to the white leaders that they were completely disregarding the rights of Native Americans, and they were disrespecting the Native Americans the Sioux, the Cheyenne, the Arapaho, the other tribes in their treaties, because he could see that they were creating treaties with the Native Americans that they had absolutely no intention of honoring. And he said this is going to have horrible consequences. And again, down the line, it did with the Plains Indians War and things like Custer's Last Stand. Let me ask you, when you think about some of the wisest people who ever lived, if you had the opportunity to travel back in time, would it be to meet someone like Pierre de Smet, someone who was so dedicated to reaching a certain group of people for Jesus and so very wise? Would it be somebody like Pierre de Smet? Would it be somebody like Mother Teresa? Or maybe it'd be a great writer, maybe somebody like Laura Ingalls Wilder. If you could travel back in time, who is it that you would want to spend time with? Maybe it would be sitting at the feet of Jesus a little over 2,000 years ago. Over the next few minutes, we're going to meet some people who actually did have the opportunity to sit at the feet of Jesus. And you'd think, wow, to be able to actually be there live and in person with Jesus as he traveled around, what an incredible thing that would be, to be able to listen to and respond to the teachings of Jesus in person there in the Galilean countryside. Well, it didn't actually go quite as well as you might think. And when I mentioned that there were people who should have listened to Pierre de Smet, but they didn't, we're going to be looking at some people who should have listened to Jesus, but they didn't. And I guess the question for us is, what does Jesus have to say to us? And it's very easy to look back in time and in history and say, well, if those people had only done this, or if those people had only done that, things could have gone a lot better for them. But I want us to turn the mirror on ourselves and say, what is Jesus saying to us today? And what is it that we need to listen to? We're in Mark chapter 6, verses 1 through 6. And I'm going to be reading from the New Living Translation, and you follow along in whatever your preferred translation is. Jesus left that part of the country. It was the part of the country, the Gerasenes, where he healed a man who was possessed of demons, and then he raised Jairus' daughter from the dead. He left that part of the country and returned with his disciples to Nazareth, his hometown. The next Sabbath, he began teaching in the synagogue, and many who heard him were amazed. Now, when we say that somebody's amazed, there's two kinds of amazed, isn't there? There's the, wow, isn't that great kind of amazed. And there's the, who does that guy think he is kind of amazed. I wonder which kind of amazed it was when people in Nazareth listened to Jesus. They heard him and were amazed. They asked, where did he get all this wisdom and the power to perform such miracles? Then they scoffed. He's just a carpenter, the son of Mary, and the brother of James, Joseph, Judas or Jude, and Simon. And his sisters live right here among us. They were deeply offended and refused to believe in him. There's a saying in the southern United States, don't get above your raisin. And it's clear that these country folk thought that Jesus had gotten above his raisin. You can see that they're asking the question, who does this guy think he is? Then Jesus told them, a prophet is honored everywhere except in his own hometown and among his relatives and his own family. And because of their unbelief, he couldn't do any miracles among them, except to place his hands on a few sick people and heal them. And Jesus, in turn, look at verse 6, and he was amazed at their unbelief. There were two sets of amazed here. The amazed of who does this guy think he is, and the amazed of how can they miss out on everything that I have to offer them. Look back in verse 3. Then they scoffed. He's just a carpenter, the son of Mary and the brother of James, Joseph, Judas, and Simon. And his sisters live right here among us, and they were deeply offended and refused to believe in him. The word here in Greek that is translated as deeply offended and refused to believe in him is the Greek word scandalon. And what it means is that there's a stumbling block that is so large that I'm tripping all over it. They were so gripped by who does this guy think that he is, that it blinded them to who Jesus really was and what Jesus wanted to do among them. And I have to ask myself, and I want to encourage you to ask yourself, what is it that I trip over when it comes to a relationship with Jesus Christ, when it comes to really being fully surrendered to Jesus Christ? What is it that I trip over? For some people, maybe it's that I prayed for healing, or I prayed for a miracle at some point, and like Paul, it didn't happen. I prayed and I prayed and I prayed, and Jesus said to me the same thing that he said to Paul: my grace is sufficient for you. And I want you to lean not on my healing, I want you to lean on my grace. But I didn't want to lean on God's grace there. I wanted God to heal me, or I wanted God to heal this particular family member. So maybe that's the thing that you trip over. Or maybe it's something like speaking in tongues. Well, there's this group of Christians over here who are called Pentecostals, and I just don't understand that, and I'm not comfortable with that, and I trip over it. Or maybe it's a real fundamental group, and how can that group call themselves followers of Jesus when all I see is that they're fighting fundies, and I trip all over that. What is it that you trip all over in your relationship with Jesus? And that's really a two-part question. If I was fully surrendered to Jesus, what would that look like? How would my life be different than it is now? Maybe just jot those things down. If my life was 100% surrendered to Jesus Christ, what would that look like? And then two, what is it that keeps me from doing that? For some people, the thing that they trip over is maybe God would ask me to do something I don't want to do. And that's the thing, because I don't truly trust God. And I think that he might send me to do something that I don't want to do. What is it that causes me to trip up over Jesus Christ? Now, remember that it says here that they were deeply offended. The word scandalon actually means they were blinded to what Jesus was offering them. And some translations bring that out, that they were blinded by their offense. One of Jesus's most common miracles, if we can call a miracle common, is that he healed blinded eyes. But you'll notice here that it doesn't say anything about healing blinded eyes. Why? Because their blindness was self-inflicted by their offense over who does this guy think he is. And because of their spiritual blindness, they were tripping all over Jesus. But their tripping never caused them to fall on their knees in repentance. So as we close today, What's holding us back from seeing who Jesus really is and the miracles he wants to do in our lives? What's our scandalon? And what's the place where we struggle with unbelief? I would encourage each one of us, and I'm going to do this today as well, to get alone with the Lord and talk to Jesus about getting that worked out. Lord, here's a place where I really, really struggle with being fully surrendered to you. And therefore, I want to talk to you about this and I want to get this right. Until we do that, until we get alone with Jesus, until we get that worked out, the Bible says that we're going to be missing out on the miracles that Jesus wants to do. He could not do many miracles in their presence. Because of their unbelief, he couldn't do any miracles. Now, I want that my life will have as many miracles, as many blessings, as many incredible works of God in my life and the lives of people around me as absolutely possible. So God, today, I want to get it straight with you that you show me those things that I'm tripping over. God, I want to get that right. And I want to really begin to see more miracles in my life because of a right relationship with you, and that I'm not tripping over anything, that there's no scandalon in my life. There's nothing scandalous that's keeping me from being fully surrendered to you. God bless you. God willing, we'll be back with you again next week to talk about the godly pursuit of wisdom. Where did he get all this wisdom from? And does that cause us to be amazed? Ooh, I want that in my life too. Or does that cause us to be amazed and offended? Who does this guy think he is? I pray it's the first and not the second. God bless you, and God willing, as I said, we'll see you again next week.